The 2023 MacBook Air is looking like it's going to be an awesome machine. We've had a number of recent leaks and rumors pointing at some very exciting updates, and on top of that, we've also now updated our Concept 2 in collaboration with Concept Creator. So we'll go over everything that's new, we'll take a look at some new colors and more, so yeah, here's everything you need to know in terms of the M3 2023 MacBook Air. So in late February of this year, we've had a new listing in the Bluetooth Launch Studio database by Apple, showcasing a new Mac with Bluetooth 5.3. Now, this doesn't seem like much, but it actually gives away way more than you would think. First, the newly released 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros already come with Bluetooth 5.3. The new Mac Minis also come with Bluetooth 5.3, so the only Macs that don't have Bluetooth 5.3 are the iMac, the Mac Studio, the Mac Pro, the 13-inch MacBook Pro, and the MacBook Air. So whichever new Mac Apple has just registered in the Bluetooth database is going to be one of these models. And second, it means that the release date for one of these new Macs is way closer than what you would think. But the thing is that it's not just this Bluetooth listing that gives us an idea for its release date. We've had plenty of other reports as well. For example, Mark Gurman just said in his latest Power On newsletter that he expects a new MacBook Air to launch between late spring and summer. Not only that, but Russ Young, who has a very good track record as well, he said that he expects April as the release date for the new MacBook Air. Whereas the 95Mac report claims that the new MacBook Air is coming at WWDC in June. So just looking at all of these reports and kind of merging the data together, I think that the most likely option would be a new MacBook Air at WWDC alongside the new M3 chip. Just think about it, the M2 chip was unveiled at WWDC 2022. So it would make sense for the M3 to also launch in June. So okay, what can we expect from this new M3 chip? According to 95Mac's exclusive reports, the core count would actually remain the same, at least on the CPU side. So this will still be an 8-core processor like the M1 and the M2 chips. However, the big improvement here will be in terms of power efficiency, with the M3 chip now being manufactured on a 3nm manufacturing process as opposed to 5 like the M1 and the M2 chips were. This should give us about a 35% lower power consumption, which is very significant, but just don't expect to actually see a 35% longer battery life, as Apple will very likely increase the GPU core counts like they did with the M2 chip from the M1. But some battery life improvement will definitely be felt. I would guess that we're going to get maybe 1 extra hour, maybe a tiny bit more than that. But the improved battery life won't be the only improvement that the 3nm M3 chip would bring. In fact, we're also expected to see improved performance, as the M2 chip especially was a stopgap chip. Since the M2 was manufactured on the exact same process as the M1, the 5nm, the only way for Apple to improve its performance was by brute forcing. That's why they increased the GPU core count for more power, and that's why the CPU clock speeds and just the CPU performance in general didn't really see that much of an improvement over the M1. Now, aside from extra performance, another improvement of the M3 chip would be thermal performance. In fact, this was an issue with the M2 MacBook Air. We've seen major throttling in games where after just a few minutes of gameplay, the frame rate would be dropped significantly. Now, that wasn't just because of the extra GPU cores, it was also because Apple actually removed a metal heatsink that they used to have on the M1 MacBook Air. I don't believe the M3 model would bring back that heatsink because of the limited space inside, but I do believe that the chip itself would be more thermal efficient because of that switch to a 3nm manufacturing process. So, M3 chip, some pretty exciting upgrades, better performance, better thermals, a longer battery, but are we expecting to see anything else in terms of this new MacBook Air? Well, there is one big update, which is the fact that for the first time since the MacBook Air launched, we would now see a larger size than just 13 inches, and that would be that long-rumored 15-inch size. Also, I don't know if this is intended or not, but the original MacBook Air launched in 2008, which is 15 years ago. So launching a 15-inch model now seems quite well planned. Probably isn't though, I think it's just a coincidence, but definitely an interesting one. And now we've made a new concept of this 15-inch MacBook Air, which has the same design style as the 13-inch, but in a larger 15-inch form factor and with some differences. The biggest difference, of course, being that display, which we modeled at 15.6 inches compared to 13.6 on the smaller model. The 15-inch MacBook Pro had a 15.4-inch panel, so we gave the Air a 15.6, as we do have that extra vertical space next to the notch. Now, since the keyboard is essentially the same size as on a 13-inch model, we gave it some extra space on the sides, where Apple could add some upwards-facing speakers like on the MacBook Pros, but to keep the design in line with a 13-inch, we've just left the speakers under the keyboard. Now, when it comes to the ports, we've kept the same ports as on a 13-inch MacBook Air, so MagSafe on the left and 2 Thunderbolt ports, and only a headphone jack on the right. Now, personally, I would love to see a third Thunderbolt on the right-hand side for charging and also connecting it to a monitor from whichever side that you want. That would be super, super useful, but I do believe that Apple won't do this and that they would keep that functionality for the MacBook Pros only. So now let's talk about the colors. It is very likely that Apple will give this 15-inch model the exact same colors that they have for the 13-inch. So that means Midnight, Space Gray, Starlight, and Silver. And these would look awesome, especially since this would be the very first time we've had Starlight and Midnight on a large screen MacBook. But of course that they could also introduce some brand new colors. So we've rendered a few options of what we would absolutely love for Apple to make. For example, this purple, which looks really cool and I don't know, it kind of gives it a cosmic look. Then we've also rendered it in this red, which would match with the upcoming red on the iPhone 15 Pros. Then we also gave it this green, which looks really, really classy and looks stunning. Absolutely love that green. And then my favorite, matte black. You see, Midnight on the M2 Air was quite similar to matte black from certain angles, depending on how the light was actually hitting it, but I would love to see an actual matte black, just like the 2008 MacBook, if you guys remember that. Speaking of the MacBook, according to Ming-Chi Kuo, this 15-inch MacBook Air might not actually be called a MacBook Air, but instead, it could simply just be called MacBook, which would make a lot of sense. Apple did used to do this in the past a long time ago. They used to have 3 models: the Air, which was the thin and light model, the MacBook, which was the default, and then the Pro, which was thicker and more powerful. And they could easily bring that mentality back with this new 15-inch MacBook, which would sit in between the Air and the 14-inch MacBook Pro in terms of its offering. But this actually raises 2 questions. 1, will it actually be more powerful than the 13-inch MacBook Air? And 2, how would it compare to that 13-inch MacBook Pro? Well, in terms of the performance, we've actually had quite a few contradictory reports here. So according to DigiTimes, this 15-inch MacBook would come with the M2 chip. But then according to Ming-Chi Kuo, it would come with both the M2 as well as the M2 Pro. And of course, the M2 Pro would outperform the 13-inch MacBook Air, even if that 13-inch Air comes with the M3 chip. However, both 95Mac and Mark Gurman believe that we will see the M3 chip inside both this 15-inch as well as the new 13-inch MacBook Air, which makes a lot of sense if they're both called Air. If this is just called a MacBook, then I can indeed see that M2 Pro being included in it, and then an earlier release, like, for example, April. Which brings us to that second question. What about the 13-inch MacBook Pro? Would it be discontinued? Well, it would make a lot of sense for Apple to just drop it entirely. It has a very old design, and especially if this new 15-inch MacBook has the M2 Pro chip, it would make 0 sense for it to be more powerful than a 13-inch MacBook Pro, which of course has Pro in its name. Well, according to 95Mac, it actually won't be discontinued, but instead it would get updated with the M3 chip, and likely the same design as the M2 and M1 model, and all the Intel ones from 2016. So essentially the only scenario that ties all of these reports together would be the 15-inch model being called a MacBook Air, and then both the 15-inch and the 13-inch Airs having the M3 chip inside. But wouldn't a 15-inch Air simply go against the whole idea of the Air in the first place, which is to be the super small and portable laptop? Well, not entirely. You see, if you want a large screen MacBook, the only option is the 16-inch model, which starts from $2,500 or £2,700 in the UK. That is crazy expensive. The 15-inch Air would likely start from around $1,500 to $1,600, as the 13-inch MacBook Pro starts from $1,300, so it would be right above that, and less expensive, of course, than the 14-inch MacBook Pro. And it would still be super portable for a 15-inch laptop, especially compared to the much heavier and much thicker 16-inch MacBook Pro. But to me, the most exciting part about this new 15-inch Air is the battery life. You see, on the 16-inch model, we have 22 hours. On the M2 Air, we have 18. So even if Apple used the same M2 chip and simply bumped the size to 15 inches, we would likely be getting around 20 hours thanks to the larger battery. But since this will come with the M3 chip, the battery life will likely be increased to 21 or even 22 hours. Having that on the road with you, a large screen laptop that's super thin, super light, and with an amazing battery life, that would be so awesome for business users. Would you get a 15-inch MacBook Air, or would you still prefer the added portability of the smaller 13-inch model? And if you do want to get the smaller 13-inch model right now, there are some great offers linked if you tap on the YouTube shoppable cards down below. Do stay tuned for more Leaks and Rumors episodes. I'm Daniel, this has been ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH signing out. Cheers.